Hello, my name is Keshwani. There's Keshwani, Keshwani. We are here because we want to improve our vocabulary. Today we'll have our quiz number 12. Today we will have a quiz on all the words, for those of you who've been watching these vocabulary videos, as you would know, that we have a quiz at the end of every 5 days. Today, because it is quiz number 12, it will cover the words that we learn on day number 56 through 60. Let's get going. And as you also know, that in these quizzes, I do not go into depths. We do not cover the words in details. We don't worry about the pronunciation. I don't write out the pronunciation on the blackboard most of the time because this is a fast pace. This is a quiz. This is not actually. This video is not actually meant to learn the words in the first place. If you want to learn the words properly, if you want to learn the meanings of the words in depth, watch the actual videos, which are vocabulary videos, day number 56 through 30. So here we go. The very first word we learn on day number 56. As a matter of fact, all the words that we learn on day number 56, there were only 3. All 3 of the words that we learn on day number 56, they all basically mean the same thing. The very first word we learned was ramshackle. Ramshackle means something that is run down, something that is breaking apart, something that is not in a good shape. A rundown building, a rundown apartment building, a rundown warehouse, rundown school is said to be ramshackle. It is crumbling, it is old. Crumbling, old, not well taken care of, not well taken care of, something that is falling apart. And the second word we learned, which means basically the same thing as ramshackle, was the word dilapidated. If something is said to be dilapidated, it is fallen in a state of disrepair, something that was not well maintained, something that is decaying, crumbling, that is run down, as I said, something that is run down. I'm not sure if rundown is hyphenated or not. I'll leave it up to you to check. And that's what dilapidated means. They mean the same thing. It means fallen to a state of disrepair, something that is not well maintained, something that is rickety. So that was the last word we learned, something that is rickety. Something that is rickety is something that is shaky, something that is infirm, something that is not strong, run down. And I just learned that run down actually is hyphenated. That's all. Those were the 3 words that we learned on day number 56. And as I said, they all mean the same thing. Dilapidated, ramshackle, rickety, run down, nasty, in a nasty shape, in a state of disrepair. Something that is in that state is said to be dilapidated, ramshackle, rickety. I don't want to buy that house. That house is absolutely dilapidated. It's absolutely ramshackle. I'm not interested in it. I'll have to fix it. I will have to spend a fortune fixing it. Why? Because it is absolutely dilapidated. On day number 57, day 57 we learned 2 words which we see many a times in many books because these 2 words are very easily confused, and the words were affect with the affect, and effect. As you can see, effect with an I. Effect, and affect. What is the difference between these two words? As I said, these two words are very often confused and used improperly in place of the other. We have to understand. The word effect actually is a word, is a verb. Effect, in fact, is a noun. That's all it is. I should have had a forethought of coming up with some sort of a nice mnemonic device. I have not. It would have been nice to have some mnemonic device. Effect means to influence, to cause something to happen. To influence, to have an impact, to have an impact. As you can see, it says to because it's a verb. Effect, on the other hand, is a noun, which means a consequence, a result. Consequence, result, an outcome, the final outcome, result, or we already put down result. How about finally the upshot? The upshot of something is said to be the upshot is said to be the result, the outcome, the final result that you may have. It is called effect. Effect is a noun, affect is a verb. I still do not know how to keep them, how we will keep them separate in our mind. We have to come up with some nifty mnemonic device. Mnemonic device is something that we make up something to remember. Mnemonic device is something that we make up to remember something. If you can think of some nice mnemonic device to keep these two words separate, post them or post a comment on the video, and that way everybody can benefit from it. The adjective of effect will be effective. An upshot is the final outcome. And that's all there was. That was day number 57. The idioms that we hear very often, is to take effect, which means to come into force, to become operative. To take effect means to come into force. That law does not come into effect until next Thursday. Another idiom that we might you may have heard of is in effect, which means in fact, in reality, in essence. And again, all of these are covered. All of this is covered in detail in the actual video. I want to wrap this up. Let's move on to day number 58. On day 58, the very first word we learned was a repertoire. What is a repertoire? A repertoire is basically a list of gigs that the performers can perform. It's a list of gigs that a performer is able to perform. That performer could be anybody. It could be a singer. It doesn't even have to be. It could be a singer. It could be a pianist. It could be an opera singer. It could be a dancer. Whatever it is, the things that you're able to do in front of the audience. If it's something is part of repertoire, something that is part of your repertoire, that means you are able to do it. It's a range or list of songs or plays or opera performances that an actor is able to perform, and it is called a repertoire. But of course, the word can also be used very loosely in terms of a range of skill or aptitude that aptitude of a person. Do you understand? So if something is a part of his repertoire, that means he's able to do it. He's able to perform it. He knows how to do it because it is part of his repertoire. The next word we learned on day number 58 was completely unrelated to the word that we just talked about, and the word is condone. Condone means to forgive or to excuse or to overlook. I know what you have done is wrong. I'm fully aware of it, that it is not something we appreciate. This is something that you should not have done, but I'm willing to overlook. I'm going to condone it only this time. It can be taken as I'm willing to forgive it, or I'm going to excuse you from it. I'm going to pardon you. To forgive, to excuse, to pardon. Or it could simply mean that I'm going to overlook it. This time I'm going to let it slide. This time I'm going to let it slide. In other words, I'm going to refrain from showing my disapproval. I'm going to refrain from showing my disapproval. In other words, what you did was wrong and I'm not happy about it, but I'm not going to punish you. I'm not going to show any disapprobation. I'm just going to let it slide. Now, if you don't know what disapprobation means, we just learned it. I don't remember which day it was, but just a couple of days ago. In the last quiz, on quiz number 11, we talked about the word approbation, which means appraise, to say nice thing about somebody. Approbation. So I'm not going to show my disapprobation. I'm not going to show my disapproval. I'm not going to give you any punishment. I'm not going to penalize you. I'm just going to overlook it. I'm going to condone it. Do you understand? Let's learn the word refrain. Refrain is an interesting word because it has two meanings. The word refrain means two different things, depending on the part of speech, depending on how it is being used. Refrain is a verb and refrain is a noun. As a noun, refrain is part of a phrase or a verse that is repeated at interval throughout a song or a poem. When we hear a song, there's typically some words or a line that is repeated several times in the song. It appears at the end of each stanza, it appears at the end of each verse. That's the main line. People remember that particular song with that line because that line is repeated several times in the song, and that is called a refrain. A phrase or a line, that is repeated at intervals several times in a song or a poem. In the poem, at the end of each stanza, at the end of each verse, there is a line that is repeated, and that line is called a refrain. Now that is the meaning of the word refrain as a noun. The word refrain as a verb means entirely different things. As a verb, to refrain means to hold back. To restrain. To restrain oneself. To abstain. Please refrain from I was going to say swimming, that's not what I meant to say. Not swimming. Please refrain from smoking in this establishment, which is a very fancy way of saying no smoking. Don't smoke. Refrain from smoking at this establishment. Instead of putting a sign up saying refrain from smoking at this establishment, sign that we actually say is no smoking. Don't smoke. Refrain from it. Do you understand? Don't do it. That's what the word refrain means as a verb. It means to restrain oneself from doing something, to hold back oneself from doing something. You may be asked to refrain from swearing. Please don't swear. Don't use the cuss word in this room, in this classroom. Refrain from swearing. Refrain from using your cell phone. You understand? The very last word we learned on day number 58 was myopia. These words have nothing to do with each other. They are completely unrelated. These are just some words that I wanted to learn, and here they are. They are not in any particular order. They are not in particular rhythm. There isn't any particular rhythm or rhyme to them. They're just words. Hodgepodge put together. Do you understand? Myopia. What does myopia mean? Myopia actually is a disease. It's a noun. It's a noun which just means short sightedness. I hope I spelled it correctly. Short sightedness. This is an E, not an I. If you're short sighted, if you need to wear glasses because you're short sighted, which means you're unable to see distant objects. Or not necessarily unable, but you have difficulty seeing distant objects. And if you have trouble seeing distant objects, you need to wear glasses, then in that case, that person is said to be short-sighted. Not far-sighted. Far-sighted means you can't see the objects that are close to you. You're short-sighted means you cannot see you cannot see objects that are at distant. And that is called, that disease, that condition is called myopia. Now that's what the word means literally. Metaphorically, so that's the literal meaning of the word. This is the literal meaning. Metaphorically, if somebody is described as myopic, it simply means that that person cannot plan for future. They have a very narrow range of time. You may have a CEO who is very myopic in his outlook. He only thinks about the profits in the next quarter. He only thinks about the profit in the next year. He does not plan, he does not think about what would happen to the company 10, 20, 30 years down the road. That is called a myopic view. Short-sightedness in literal sense, but in metaphorical sense, it means unable to think about far future. Unable to think or plan for distant future. Just now I said far future, but it sounds silly. If you cannot plan for distant future, you are said to be myopic in your outlook. And the condition is called myopia. Day number 59. On day 59, we started out with two words, and the words were apocryphal and spurious. The difference between the word apocryphal and spurious has to do with their nuance. They both basically mean the same thing, but the difference lies in the nuance. If you do not know the word nuance, then that's not a good sign actually. Nuance is the very first word that we learned on day number 1, I believe. The very first day of our vocabulary lesson, we learned the word nuance, which means minute and subtle differences in the meanings of the word. So what is the subtle, minute difference between the word apocryphal and word spurious? If something is apocryphal, it means that it looks genuine, but is in fact bogus. So something that looks real, something that looks okay, but you know it's bogus, such a thing is called apocryphal. It is of doubtful authenticity. An apocryphal thing is of doubtful authenticity. Of doubtful authenticity. I cannot spell things. It's of doubtful authenticity. In other words, you're not sure about whether or not it's authentic. Of doubtful authenticity. Something that is dubious. Whereas if you describe something as spurious, it's just out and out lie. Something that is bogus. Something that is bogus. There is no doubt about it. You know it's bogus. You know it to be false. There is no doubt about it. Obviously, you're going to go around buying a Rolex on the sidewalk in New York and Manhattan for $25. Obviously, it's spurious. It's bogus. Do you understand? There is no doubt about it. It's not that such a watch will be not described as apocryphal. It's just bogus. So, a spurious comment or a spurious story would be something that you know is not true, whereas an apocryphal statement is a statement that is of doubtful authenticity. You're not sure whether or not that person is telling you the truth. Do you understand? You might say to somebody, well, I don't know, he told me a story, but it sounds a bit apocryphal. It sounds a bit apocryphal, which means you're not sure whether that story is true. On the other hand, you know that the guy is full of it, and you know he's lying to you. So it's just a spurious statement that he made. A statement that I know for a fact is not right. Do you understand? So that was the difference between the word apocryphal and spurious. Let's move on then. Next word that we learned on day number 59 was decree. A decree is a royal command, a royal order, a royal proclamation. If a king or a monarch issues an order, that order is called a decree. I was going to say and I was going to say a different word, which is the next word that we learn. It's a decree. Do you understand? It's an order. Now, I'm going to share something with you, which I know vast majority of you would not know what I'm talking about. It's probably because you're too young. But if there is anybody out there who is into Woody Allen movies, I don't know which movie, I can't remember it, but there is a movie somewhere where there is a movie of Woody Allen where he's depicting a third world dictator, and that dictator issues a decree one day to all these people, all of his subjects. I use the word subjects because he's a dictator, telling them that starting from today, starting from tomorrow, all the underwear should be worn on the outside. It's a royal command. It's a proclamation. You mustn't ignore it. You ignore it at your own risk. All underwear must be worn outside, he says. It's an order. It's a decree. It's a royal command. It's an edict. Let's learn that word. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's some dictator is depicting of South America. An edict, again, is a formal proclamation, a formal command, a decree issued by a monarch or a king, or even a governing body. Or a government can issue an edict, a government can issue a decree saying that from now on, from this point on, this is a new law, it's a decree. You understand? Let's go on to day number 60. On day number 60, we learn bunch of words, and they all have to do with blood. They all have to do with blood and violence and disgusting stuff. But not necessarily, but they all have to do with blood, that's for sure. The very first word we learned was, all of these words, the very first word we learned on day number 60 was sang-froid. Sang-froid comes from French, and the prefix which you see here, sang, means blood, and froid means cold. Cold, to French, as French would say, il fait froid, il fait froid, il fait chaud. It's cold, it's hot. When they're describing weather, that's what they will say. Il fait chaud, il fait froid. Or rather, il fait chaud is in hot, il fait froid, it's cold. That's where the word cold comes from. That's where the word, that's what the word froid means. It means cold. And the prefix is sang, which means blood. Listen carefully. It's a tricky word in English. In the English language, it becomes tricky. So literally, if you were to translate the word, literally it means cold blood. But that's not what it means. To be cold-blooded in English language has a different meaning. If you're cold-blooded, it means you have no emotions. You do something without emotions. You can commit cold-blooded murder and so forth. But that's not what the word means. Sang-froid, as it appears in, as it translated in English language, it means that you're calm. Your blood is cold. You're not excited. If you were excited, you were angry, your blood will be hot. Your blood will be, the expression that we use is that my blood was boiling. Your blood is not boiling, your blood is cold, you're calm. It means to stay calm. To stay calm. To not get excited. To not get excited. If you stay calm, if you're not excited, if you keep your composure, you're said to have sang-froid. So literally it means cold blood, but it does not mean to be cold-blooded. Do you understand? The next word we learned also had the prefix of sang, but it is no longer pronounced in a French way. It is pronounced differently. It is pronounced differently, and the word is sanguine. Sanguine is adjective. If you're sanguine, sanguine literally means to be, literally it means ruddy, of the color of blood. So if your face is ruddy, if your face is of the color of blood, if your cheeks are very rosy and very red, what does it imply? What does it show? It shows that you're optimistic. You're optimistic. You're cheerful. You're happy. You're confident. You're cheerful. You're happy. You're self-assured. You have self-assurance. And if you have that kind of disposition, your face will be ruddy. Then your cheeks will be rosy. And that's where the word sanguine comes from. To be sanguine means to be optimistic, to be rosy, to be confident, to be cheerful. Sanguine. Let's learn the next word, which also has a prefix of sang, blood, and that word was these are tricky words. Make sure if you're going to use them, make sure you understand these words properly and make sure you use them properly. Otherwise, you can make a fool of yourself. Sanguinary is the next word, which has nothing to do with the word sanguine. Again, one more time. Sanguine means to be cheerful, to be confident, to be happy, to be optimistic. Sanguinary means to be bloodthirsty. A murderer, a person who is on a rampage with a machine gun, is said to be of sanguinary state. That person's mind is, he's sanguinary, he's bloodthirsty, having to do with carnage. It means having to do with carnage. He was in a sanguinary state of mind when he committed this crime. It means to be savage. And finally, it means to be gory. Let's learn the word gory. Gory was the last word we learned. Gory means bloody, violent. It literally means, if something is gory, it literally means it is covered by gore. Gore means blood. It means it deals with bloodshed. It deals with extreme violence. How did you like that movie you saw last night? Was it a good movie? Was it a funny movie? No, it wasn't a funny movie. It was pretty gory, which means the movie was very violent. There was blood everywhere. I did not like it. It was very violent. It was very unpleasant. It dealt with carnage. It dealt with death and so forth. If someone says, if you're telling somebody, if your teacher asks you, or somebody asks you, your boss or anybody asks you, well, what happened yesterday you did not show up, or what happened, how come the work is not done, and you start giving them a long story about all those tragic things that happened in your life yesterday, which prevented you from showing up for work or doing the assigned work, the other person might say, well, spare me the gory details. Just get to the punchline. Just tell me, is it done or not? That's it. Did you do it? Did you bring it with you? Spare me the gory details. Do you understand? I don't want to hear those nonsense. Anyway, that was the end of the day number 60. That was the last word that we learned on day number 60, and therefore that is the end of our quiz today. I will see you tomorrow, and we'll continue our journey. And an idea is to learn few words every day, and as long as you keep up with it, as long as you have the discipline, you will see over time a marked improvement in your vocabulary. It takes time. It takes a year, maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years, depending on how fast you go, depending on how much work you put into it. But it's not how many words you try to learn every day. That's not what matters. Of course, it plays a role. But what is even more important is whether or not you're consistent. A lot of people start out with good intention, but after a while they just give up on it. That's not the way to do it. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Bye now.